Okay, so there's still some more people joining, but I am going to get started. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. This webinar is going to be about 30 minutes, so I'll leave a few extra minutes at the end for any questions that we have. But I'm super excited to get talking about some of the topics I have today. Just to give you an introduction, my name is Nick Billabong, and I am the Channel Partner Manager here at BioConnect. And my role is to really manage our key integrated partners in North America. I've been with BioConnect for just over 3 years now, and I started off in our technical applications team, so I have a little bit of technical knowledge, so feel free to ask any technical questions. I'd be happy to answer that. In my short time here, I can definitely say that things have significantly changed in the biometric space. But before we dive a little deeper into that, let's look at some of the things I've prepared. So I do want to discuss biometrics then and now. I want to look at some of the changes that we're starting to see, some of the trends. We'll look at compliance and regulation, the main things that we're seeing today in the biometric space, and how biometrics can help you meet some of the compliance demands in a lot of projects. I put together some common use cases, and we'll also look at some deployment types as well. So as I mentioned, throughout my 3 years at BioConnect, a lot has changed. If you look at the headlines, a lot of it is dominated by this new shift towards mobile biometrics. If you haven't already learned, MasterCard just launched their Selfie Pay for customers, which allows customers to use facial recognition to pay for things. Citibank also has adopted voice biometrics for customer care. So there's a lot of things changing. We're moving away from hardware to this mobile world. But what about hardware? How has hardware changed? Well, let's just kind of look at the past. I like to share this landscape slide here. Biometrics in the past, they're really born out of this government space. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this, where you have high levels of assurance required. And in these spaces, there were low levels of transactions being taken. On the opposite spectrum, you have the consumer market, where billions of biometric transactions are taking place with lower levels of assurance. This is mainly, in my opinion, because consumers value convenience over security. So there's a bit of a balancing act. With the introductions of biometrics on mobile phones, consumers are increasingly becoming familiar, and I think they're becoming comfortable with biometrics. You can thank the iPhone for that. And this is driving massive adoption in the enterprise space. The problem we face, however, is that the hardware that was born out of the government space has been clunky, it's been difficult, and it's been complex to install. And we've tried to take those pieces of hardware and push them in and make them work in the enterprise space. And it just hasn't worked very well. And luckily, that's changed. There's a lot more solutions now that allow for just the right amount of assurance with the convenience that so many consumers are used to. This chart here just showcases how big we believe the second wave of biometric adoption is going to be. The first wave was around 2001 when we experienced that massive surge in demand for assurance and identity. And now what we're set to see is an industry worth $44 billion, which we coin as the mobile revolution. The Globe and Mail estimates that 770 million biometric authentication apps are going to be downloaded by the year 2029. And these are some of the companies leading that biometric mobile revolution. You have companies like NIMI up here in the corner, which is a heartbeat sensor that lives on your wrist. It measures your ECG. We have voice biometrics by Nuance, iVerify, which measures and looks at your iris, and then of course Touch ID, which we're all familiar with. Now, aside from mobile biometrics, let's look at hardware. Lots has also changed on the hardware front. The first one, I think, is cost. Costs have significantly decreased. Not only are they becoming more affordable and more cost-effective, but biometric hardware is also becoming easier to install and much more reliable, which is also driving down the cost of installation. And this has made it a lot easier for consumers to actually choose biometrics over traditional card access. Performance, I think, is a big one. We're at a point now where biometrics just work, and they work very, very well. In terms of, there's so many great integrations out there, there's so many great point-to-point and open integrations now that allow for biometrics to be easily integrated into existing access control systems. So we looked a little bit at the biometric landscape. I'm going to move into some compliance and regulations as well. We tend to see, you know, my years in tech support and what we're seeing a lot now is biometrics being installed in areas where there's a lot of compliance and regulation needs. This is just 4 out of so many that exist, but they're ones that I'm much more familiar with, ones that I find biometrics really help in. First one is PCI, which I think is the most common one, and PCI stands for the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. And really what I guess the important piece for this is that it really applies to companies of any size that accept credit card payments, or companies that store, process, transmit any cardholder data. Any companies that have this responsibility have the duty to protect not only physical access but also digital data. Physical data is where we have a strong fit. Some great examples: data centers, insurance companies, anywhere where you have server cabinets with customer data. And this could represent one closet. It could be one little IT closet in a mom and pop shop to 100,000 square feet location. HIPAA is also another regulation we often see ourselves in. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which really sets the standard for protecting sensitive patient data. So any company or business that deals with protected health information, they need to ensure that they have the required physical network security measures in place. HIPAA doesn't explicitly require biometrics, but it does ask for the use of two-factor authentication. Although a lot of health organizations choose to deploy biometrics anyways as that second piece. So imagine card plus fingerprint as an example. ITAR, ITAR is the International Traffics in Arms Regulations, and this really applies to companies involved in the manufacturing or distribution of goods and services under the United States Munitions List. This particular compliance asks, quote unquote, to implement strong measures. So it's really up for you to decide what you actually implement. And then lastly, we have SOC 2, which is the requirement for a company to provide, track, record, and provide an audit trail and report of people's whereabouts as it refers and relates to the privacy of the system. I just had a question here. Give me 1 sec. I'll answer all the questions at the end there, but there was one question. I'll have Claire answer anything that's important. So as it relates to compliance, we find biometrics provide 3 key benefits. The first one is in response to data leakage. Often, the biggest threat to data comes from within an organization. Cisco actually reports that 40% of US-based companies have dealt with employees accessing unauthorized parts of a network or facility. So you can think of all the risk associated with that. You can have the best security measures, but if you're not managing it, what's really the point? Therefore, I think there's a massive need to educate IT professionals on the importance of protecting locations like IT closets or cash vaults to mitigate this. There's also a need to prove with complete assurance of who you are and not just what you have. Our goal as a company here at BioConnect is really to eliminate what we call suspect identity. And suspect identity really represents all these pieces of identification that you can lose: fobs, keys, pins, passwords, things that can be shared. So biometrics help in that space. They enable multi-factor authentication. A lot of compliance and regulations specifically ask for you to be able to prove something you are and something you have. So by providing a complete audit trail based on identity and not suspect identity, biometrics can help companies provide detailed reports to meet security audits and regulations that are so often demanded. And then, as I mentioned, with multi-factor authentication, you can enable stronger authentication based on something you are. Okay, so I'm going to move into some deployment types here. As you start looking at biometric identities, I think it's important to understand that for every use case, there's no cookie cutter solution. You have to be able to understand and really dive into network requirements, how companies want to store biometric data, how they want to match, and all of these different nuances will help you choose the right solution. So there's 4 different ways that biometrics are deployed in the field. The first one is what we call one-to-end matching. And one-to-end matching is when a user places a finger on a device, and that biometric device is searching and looking at the whole database to find a match. This is really, really great for companies or businesses that want to deploy finger only. So they want to eliminate keys. It gives them the total flexibility and convenience of never having to worry about carrying a physical piece of identity. And now you can just place your finger and get to the door. So I find fingerprint only and one-to-end matching really working great in small to medium-sized deployments. There's a bit of a con to, there are some cons to one-to-end matching, and this is really scalability. So the downside is when you get into a very large population size, you run the risk of people failing. And this is no different across any biometric. It's just that is the science and that's the data. With FAR rates, it's under 1%, but when you start to get in population sizes of 5,000 to 10,000 and above, then you might want to look at something like one-to-end matching, which I'll get right into. So one-to-end matching or one-to-one matching is when a customer presents a card or a PIN, and the device, the actual biometric device, retrieves that respective biometric template. So if my card number is 1234, when I present that to the device, it's going to go find that user 1234, which is me, and it's going to say, okay, please present the biometric data associated with that user or that card number. Then the user places it, and they either match or they don't. As I mentioned, the benefits of this is that it's completely scalable. You don't have to worry about the FAR rates that exist with one-to-end. Because you're not matching against a massive database, now you're matching against one cardholder data. You can scale this to really any size. One-to-one matching also fits very nicely into environments that require two-factor, because now you are matching against a card as well. You have 2 pieces of identification. Templin on card is the third method, and this is similar to one-to-one. You're not matching against the whole database. The difference here, though, is that the biometric data is stored on the card. So you're actually encoding the biometric template to that smart card. So what that means is the owner, whoever's managing or whoever owns that card also owns the biometric. So this is great when you have security concerns or if companies have concerns over privacy of where data is being stored. We see this a lot in Europe, where you can't transmit biometric data over servers. You can't hold them in the cloud or hold them in a virtual environment. So a lot of companies will choose to deploy template on a card. You also get that dual factor scenario there, where you can match obviously against a card and a fingerprint. And it's also great in scenarios where you can't pull an IP connection. So any devices or any legacy systems that you're getting into where Cat5 can't be pulled, template on card is a great scenario because you don't have to You don't have to run cable or network to these readers. Now, some of these readers a lot of readers today do have Wi-Fi, so that's not as much of a concern as I think anymore. But there are some limitations to Templin Card. One of them is you can store a limited amount of biometric data. So for the most part, I see 2 biometric templates being stored on a card. With server matching and with things like one-to-end, a lot of systems can actually match up, have the ability to match up against 10 fingerprints. So there are some drawbacks to Templin Card in that sense. All right, the last but not least, another scenario of deployment is server matching. So server matching is when biometrics is stored centrally on a server, okay, and they're distributed across the network to multiple locations. Here you can have an enrollment station, so you can have someone enrolled at the headquarters, that biometric template pushed to the network and then available at any site that's networked centrally. This is great when you have customers that have multi-sites, so multi-tenant locations. So if you have one person, if you have an employee enrolled in San Francisco and they fly to New York, instead of having to re-enroll that person at that location, if those 2 locations are in sync, then that person actually has instant access. And that's extremely valuable when you have lots of employees moving around sites. So server matching is not really a deployment type, it's a method of deploying. With server matching, you can do both one-to-end matching, you can do one-to-one as well. So that's where things kind of get a little complicated. All right. So we've looked at deployment types, we've looked at a little bit at some compliance and regulation in the industry. Now I want to tie it all together with some common use cases that we're seeing. Number one for us, where we're getting pulled in the most, is critical infrastructure. So this really, a majority of installs that I'm familiar with or have been involved with have been in the data center market specifically. In critical infrastructure, there's commonly a need to meet a lot of compliance, like PCI and SOC 2. And in these types of environments, companies, the challenge that they meet is that they need to meet compliance. They need to be able to audit on who's accessing what, when, and where. And they need to be able to prove with complete assurance. We also see a lot of deployments requiring multi-factor, as I mentioned. So with data centers, they need to actually be able to prove who people are and also prove that they own a piece of identification, like a card. And then the odd time we will get into 3-factor with PINs as well. We have a really great case study online. If you check our website, Switch has deployed hundreds of these across their Vegas locations, and they've done so very successfully. Some common areas of installations that we see for critical infrastructure include turnstiles. So if you think of man traps as you enter the building, as well as data cages, also data cabinets. So server cabinets, we've seen a lot of custom installations where these mullion mountable devices are actually fitted right on a data cabinet. So you can imagine, if you look at the ecosystem of a data center, now you have biometrics controlling everything from the point of entry to a data hall to a data cage right down to the server cabinet. And these companies are able to audit and report with almost 100% assurance who's accessing what, when, and where. Another great use case is retail. IKEA is a great customer both here in North America as well as Europe. So they're actually one of our international customers, a global customer. And not only IKEA, but a lot of retail companies choose to deploy biometrics to do a few things. There's lots of different use cases, but one, prevent theft. So biometrics help deter people accessing things like inventory rooms without the proper rights. It does improve productivity. There's a lot of time and attendance applications as well for biometrics, where biometrics can help eliminate buddy punching. That's a common use case. I think retail tends to be an easier install. You don't have to meet a lot of regulations or compliance as critical infrastructure. And it's normally because customers want to deploy biometrics for the convenience factor. So they want to eliminate keys. We have a lot of smaller retail chains that want to eliminate keys altogether. They're sick and tired of employees or managers losing keys, and they want to be able to manage biometrics centrally. So in a lot of retail applications, we also deal with multi-site locations. So this is where you'll deploy a central server, and biometrics here become beneficial when you have a security team managing biometrics from your headquarters. A lot of the times, you'll have someone sitting in their headquarters in San Francisco and doing a remote enrollment to someone in like Texas, for example. Another great use case in retail is actually using biometrics to eliminate security guards. So one specific use case was we had a company that would actually hire someone from G4S to sit outside and guard the cash vault when someone was actually counting the money. And they were able to actually eliminate this totally and see a very real return on investment just by deploying biometrics. They had a special use case there where they actually had a two-man rule, so you needed to have two people authenticate the fingerprints in order for the door to open. And then that was also layered on top of a man trap, so the front door needed to be closed before they entered that second door. So higher education. This is a really, really exciting space in my eyes. There's so many different use cases. In higher education with universities and colleges, we see a lot of schools deploying biometrics for a number of reasons. So the main one is to eliminate students from sharing passwords or PINs, losing fobs and keys. And then there's also a great use case to protect critical infrastructure like labs, anywhere where you have a lot of expensive equipment. So some of our customers deploy dual-factor solutions to protect the sensitive areas. On the other opposite spectrum, a lot of biometrics is being deployed in athletics. This is a really interesting space. And they do this for a couple of reasons. One, to make it convenient for their athletes to access things like locker rooms or facilities, the gym. And it also becomes a really great recruiting tool for a lot of these universities. You bring a prospect through your facility, and just the idea of never having to carry a fob and the exclusivity of using your biometrics to access this becomes a great selling point. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And we've seen some pretty unique cases as well, where one university deployed facial biometrics to actually regulate who's actually using their meal plans. So with the NCAA, I think you have to be able to audit that each athlete is getting one meal per day, and they're using biometrics to do that. So they have some customization where they're just outputting cardholder data to a third-party app that is then determining whether or not people are getting fed. So pretty cool use case. Great, guys. So to summarize what we went through, we looked at the 4 different deployment types. That was one-to-N, one-to-one, Templin Card. We talked about how they have different fits in every different scenario. Consumers are adopting biometrics at an exponential rate, and this is really pushing and driving a lot of demand in the consumer space. So I think 2017 is going to be a great year. There's going to be lots of hardware coming out to meet a lot of different use cases. We talked about how biometrics help to mitigate internal data leakage, how they address compliance and regulation, and then I shared with you some different use cases that I hope has given you some great insight. I'm just going to open up the floor here now for a few questions. If there's anything that you want me to dive deeper into, please let me know. I know this was a pretty high-level overview of biometrics in general, so please get technical with me or get detailed. Okay, so I got one question here. The question is SOC 2 national or state regulation? So SOC 2 is governed by the AICPA, which is a national organization that sets the standard for auditing. So I think this mainly, I'm much more familiar with North America in general, but it is national. So any company or all parties involved that want to meet these regulations need to comply. That's everything from small business to federal to state and local government. Someone asked, what is the heart icon on the bottom right? I'm not seeing that, so I think that just might be a special presentation view for you. We have another one here. You mentioned access control integrations. Can you give some examples? Good question. So that's a perfect fit. So I manage all of our access control partnerships here in North America. We have over 20. If you check our website, I'm sure you'll find an integration there. There's a lot of great ones. We just, one of the newer ones, if you guys aren't familiar with us, is Paycom. They just joined us. But some of the more popular ones include AMAG, Genetec, Linnell, Seakeer, Tyco, Paxton, Brevo. I'm probably going to forget a few, so just check our website. Software House. There's so many. Guys, I'm going to leave the floor open for just about a minute here, a couple more minutes, so please ask anything. We got another question here. Someone mentioned that they saw the Face Station 2 on Google. Yeah, so Suprema, we just had our SGPP event a couple weeks ago, and that's Suprema. So Suprema Biometrics are the biometrics that we as a company resell and manage as a partnership. They did announce an update to the facial recognition device. It's called the Face Station 2. We're probably going to see it hopefully at ISC West in 2017. So I don't have much more information other than it looks really, really great. Got another question here. Do you work with the Vigilon? Yes, we do. We do have an integration into their access control system. So I will, if anyone wants to email me directly, I will also make available online or just via email. I'll have my contact information here. We have a great document and matrix table that shows all of our compatibilities with all of our access control partners, with version numbers and everything. Okay, everyone. I think people are just dropping off now, so I just want to thank everyone for joining. We hope to host more of these, so just be on the lookout. I'll start sending out some more emails for some more detailed webinars. But otherwise, please reach out to me. My email's there, and I'd love to chat if you guys want to chat about anything in more detail. I've also recorded a copy, so we'll make that available as well. Okay, guys, thanks very much. I'm going to end the show now. Have a great day and a great rest of your week.